At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Just a bustling afternoon at Riverside Mall, crowds flowing non-stop, children laughing from the play area, Christmas music weaving through the icy winter air. In the middle of that sea of people, a man in a light blue janitor uniform was quietly scrubbing the floor. To everyone else, he was nothing but a faint shadow blending into the background, another part of the mall nobody bothered to notice. But Thomas was different. When you grow used to being invisible in the eyes of the world, you develop a strange kind of instinct. You notice things that everyone else overlooks. And today, that instinct in Thomas suddenly froze. At the corner of the hallway leading into the shopping area, a little girl around 7 stood close beside a woman who appeared to be her mother. If you only glanced, everything looked normal. But in the girl's eyes, behind those trembling, tear-wet lashes, Thomas saw something he could not ignore, a silent plea for help. Then it happened. The little girl's tiny fingers trembled as she tapped 5 times on the woman's back. A beat. Pause. Then 5 more taps. A signal Thomas recognized instantly, because he had watched dozens of videos teaching children the silent safety code, in case his own daughter was ever in danger. In that moment, Thomas's whole body tightened like a drawn wire. He stood on the edge of a decision that could change his entire life. Look away and keep the meager job he had, or risk everything by trusting the instinct of a father, and possibly save a child's life. And then, Thomas stepped toward the girl. What happened next would shake the entire Riverside Mall. Stay until the end, because what Thomas is about to uncover will leave you breathless and speechless. But before we dive deeper into this story, if you enjoy heartfelt, real-life stories like this, take a second to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss any story that touches your heart. And I'm genuinely curious. If you were Thomas in that moment, what would you do? Think about that, because the next part will answer the question. What made Thomas dare to step into danger, even though he was invisible, just a janitor? To understand why Thomas Miller noticed something that hundreds of others completely overlooked, we have to turn back the clock to 3 years earlier, the moment his life began to crack. Thomas had not always been a janitor. 3 years ago, he was an accountant at a mid-sized company in the city. Not wealthy, but his income was enough to support his family. He had a small house in the suburbs, an old car that still ran fine, and, most importantly, he had his family. His wife, Michelle, worked part-time at a clothing store, and his daughter, Emma, only 3 at the time, was the warm sunlight filling their little home. Thomas still remembered every Sunday morning when he stood in the kitchen making pancakes for his daughter, and Emma giggled as he tried to draw smiling faces with syrup on the surface of the cakes. But life sometimes has a cruel way of reminding people that happiness is never guaranteed. One November night, Thomas returned home after a long, exhausting day. He opened the door and called his wife's name as usual. No answer. Emma was playing alone in the living room, clutching her worn-out stuffed bear. "Where's your mom, Emma?" Thomas asked, trying to keep his voice steady even though his heartbeat was already stumbling. "Mom left, Daddy." Emma looked up, her voice as small as a whisper. "Mom said she won't come back." Thomas panicked and ran to the bedroom. Michelle's closet was empty. The photos that had included her were gone from the shelves. On the table lay only a signed divorce paper and a brief letter. "Thomas, I'm sorry. I can't continue this life anymore. I feel like I'm dying in this house, in this marriage. I need freedom. Emma will be better off with you. Don't look for me. Michelle." Thomas stood frozen, the paper trembling in his hand, while the world around him spun as if it were collapsing. How could a mother leave her 3-year-old child? How could Michelle walk away without even a real explanation? But that shock was only the beginning. In the months that followed, Thomas struggled to keep what remained of his little family from falling apart. He worked, took care of Emma, tried to play both the role of father and mother. But Michelle's absence left a financial hole he couldn't fill. Without a second income, he began falling behind on mortgage payments. Then his company reduced staff, and Thomas was among the first to be let go. Within 6 months, Thomas lost the house, lost the car, lost nearly everything he had ever built. But he didn't lose Emma, and he swore he never would. The two of them moved into a tiny apartment in the poor part of the city. Just 1 bedroom, a living room that doubled as the kitchen, and a bathroom with a faucet that leaked endlessly no matter how hard he tried to fix it. But it was a home. It was where Emma could be safe. And that was enough. Thomas took the first job he could find. Janitor at Riverside Mall. Low pay, no insurance, no benefits. But the job paid rent and put food on the table for Emma. And most importantly, the shift from 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon allowed him to pick Emma up from school every day. At the mall, Thomas was like an object. People walked past him without a glance. When they dirtied the floor he had just cleaned, they didn't apologize. When they needed someone to mop up a mess, they called him, "Hey, you," because no one remembered his name. Thomas grew used to that. He learned how to become invisible. Being invisible meant safety. No one asked questions about his personal life. No one judged his circumstances. But being invisible also had its advantages. When you're invisible, you observe everything. You notice what others overlook. You hear conversations people assume no one is listening to. You catch tiny details. A child crying for too long, a woman trembling as she answers the phone, a couple arguing in a secluded corner. And 3 months before that fateful day at Riverside, Thomas taught Emma the most important lesson he had ever taught his daughter: the silent safety signal. It was a quiet August evening. Thomas and Emma were sitting on the old sofa in their small apartment, the only sound being the soft hum of the air conditioner. The old TV was playing the evening news, but Thomas barely paid attention. He was scrolling through his phone, searching for extra weekend jobs to increase their income. And then he saw the video. The title popped up: "The new emergency signal every parent needs to teach their child." Curious, Thomas clicked on it. The video explained a simple hand gesture called the Signal for Help, created during the COVID pandemic. It was a way for people experiencing abuse or danger to silently alert others, especially when they couldn't openly ask for help. The signal was simple: raise one hand, palm facing outward. Tuck the thumb inward, then fold the remaining 4 fingers down, as if trapping the thumb. One small movement, but it could save a life. The video also mentioned another variation used for children, or those unable to use their hands, tapping 5 times with the fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Repeat. A discreet but unmistakable signal when someone knew its meaning. Thomas watched the video 3 times. Each time, his heartbeat sped up. He thought of Emma, thought of the big world out there, where danger sometimes hid behind the most ordinary things. Thought of how he could not always be right next to his daughter. "Emma, come here with Dad for a bit," Thomas called out, his voice more serious than usual. Emma put her stuffed bear down and climbed onto the sofa beside him. Her big bright eyes looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and innocence. "Sweetheart, Daddy wants to teach you something very, very important," Thomas said, then knelt down so he was eye level with her. "There may be moments when you need help, but you can't say it out loud. Do you understand?" Emma nodded slowly, though Thomas wasn't sure she fully grasped it. Daddy is going to teach you a special signal. If you're in danger and you can't say help, you can do this. He played the video again so Emma could watch it from the start. Then Thomas slowed down each motion, raising the hand, folding the thumb in, closing the remaining fingers. See? It's very simple. But if someone knows this signal, they'll understand you need help. Emma watched closely, then tried to imitate it. The first time she got the order wrong, and Thomas patiently adjusted each of her little fingers into place. Good job. Try again. The second time, Emma did it perfectly. Wow, that's amazing. Thomas smiled, but that smile still carried a trace of worry in his eyes. Now, Daddy wants to teach you another way. If you can't raise your hand, you can tap 5 times with your fingers. Like this. Thomas tapped lightly 5 times on Emma's palm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then repeat. Emma tapped 5 times on her father's hand. Tiny, but firm. That's right. You're doing great. But then Emma's small face suddenly paled. Her lips trembled. Daddy, are you scared someone will take me? The question pierced straight through Thomas's heart like a cold blade. He pulled Emma into his arms and held her tightly. No, sweetheart. Daddy doesn't think that will happen. But Daddy wants you to know these things, because he can't be with you every second. And if something ever happened, Daddy wants you to have a way to tell someone you need help. Emma was silent for a moment, then whispered, her voice barely audible. Like, when Mom left, when she went away, and I couldn't stop her. Thomas's throat tightened. He hadn't expected Emma to remember so clearly. She had only been 3 years old when Michelle left. Emma, your mom leaving was not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing you could have done to change it. Emma looked up, her eyes shimmering. But you won't leave me, right? Never, Thomas said, his voice firmer than anything he had ever said in his life. I will never leave you. You're everything to me. You're the reason I wake up every morning, the reason I try every single day. Emma hugged her father tightly, her cheek resting on his shoulder. I promise I'll remember the signal, she whispered. And if I see another kid doing it, I'll tell you. Or my teacher. That's right. Daddy's girl is very smart. The two of them sat quietly in the dim glow of the old TV. Thomas had no idea that just 3 months later, this small lesson would change not only his own life, but the lives of 6 other children as well. Because sometimes, a single piece of knowledge is the thin, fragile line between life and death. 3 months later, on a chilly Friday in November, Thomas woke up at 5:15 as usual. The small apartment was still drowned in darkness, with only a faint glow of streetlights slipping through the thin curtains. He carefully turned so he wouldn't wake Emma, who was curled up asleep on the little bed in the corner. With only one bedroom, the two shared the space. Thomas slept on an old mattress on the floor, while Emma got the small bed. Not ideal, but they were used to it. Thomas washed his face with cold water. The heater had been broken for 2 weeks, and he still hadn't saved enough to fix it. He put on his light blue uniform, the fabric faded from countless washes. On the chest pocket, the stitched name Thomas M. was still there, though the thread had grown thin. Before leaving, he looked back at Emma. She slept soundly. One arm wrapped around the worn, stuffed bear Michelle had bought when she was little. Thomas gently pulled the blanket up over her and kissed her forehead. "Daddy loves you, Emma," he whispered. "I'll be back to pick you up after school." He left a note on the table. "Have a great morning, Princess. Cereal is in the cabinet." Daddy loves you. Dad. Thomas locked the door and walked down the stairwell. The building's elevator had been broken for ages. Outside, the cold November morning made him pull his thin jacket tighter around himself. He walked 3 miles to the mall. No car, no money for the bus. But he didn't complain. 3 miles meant saving $3 a day. Almost $90 a month. About a whole portion of the electric bill. Thomas arrived at Riverside at 5:50. The back door was still locked, but he had the key. He stepped into the dark, quiet corridor and flipped on the lights in the staff break room. The small room was messy and smelled of leftover food mixed with dish soap. Thomas changed and prepared the cleaning cart. Mop, bucket, cleaning solution, trash bags, things he had never imagined he'd be using in his life. At exactly 6 o'clock, he started work. The mall opened at 10, but he had to make everything spotless before customers arrived. He began in the food court, wiping tables, sweeping floors, emptying trash cans overflowing from the night before. Then he moved to the retail areas, cleaning glass, polishing handrails, tidying bathrooms. The work was repetitive, monotonous, but Thomas carried out every detail with care. Not because the manager cared, he never did, but because Thomas kept his dignity in everything he did. Around 9:45, mall workers began to arrive. Stores opened, lights turned on. Christmas music floated from the speakers. The giant tree in the main hall lit up, ornaments glittering, inflatable snowmen posted at the doors. Thomas blended back into the familiar crowd, working like a shadow. No one looked at him. No one greeted him. People walked past him as if he didn't exist. At 11:30, a small incident happened. A child spilled juice right in front of the toy store. The mother panicked and called out loudly, "Sorry, can someone clean this?" Thomas heard her and pushed his cart over. But the woman was already gone, leaving the sticky puddle behind. He knelt down and cleaned it. People stepped around him. A few even scowled. "Hey, can you hurry up?" a middle-aged man snapped. "I'm trying to get through." Thomas looked up. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll finish right away." The man muttered something about useless employees, then walked off. Thomas took a deep breath. He was used to it. So used to it, he no longer felt the urge to react. Around 1 in the afternoon, Thomas was mopping the second floor near the seating area when he saw Mr. Peterson, the mall manager, approaching. Peterson was short, round, about 50, balding, with a potbelly, and always wore a suit that looked ready to burst at the seams. He was notorious for looking down on low-level workers, especially people like Thomas. "Miller," Peterson called out sharply. "The food court floor isn't clean. I saw stains." Thomas stood up. "Sir, I cleaned it 3 times this morning. Maybe someone spilled something after—" "I don't want excuses. Clean it again. And do it right this time." Peterson turned and walked away without waiting for a response. Thomas gripped the mop handle, anger simmering in his chest. But he swallowed it. Emma needed him to keep this job. He pushed the cart back to the food court. The floors gleamed. But he cleaned them again anyway, just so Peterson wouldn't have a reason to stir trouble. And that was when he saw them. A woman in a blue coat, hair tied back neatly, leading 3 children. The 2 older boys, around 9 and 11, were absorbed in talking about video games. But the 3rd child, a little girl with light brown hair and a small frame, walked silently behind them. At first, Thomas didn't pay attention. They looked like any family out for a day of shopping. But then he noticed the way the woman held the girl's hand. Not like a mother, but like a clamp, gripped so tightly the knuckles turned white. The girl kept her head down, the spark of a child enjoying a festive outing nowhere to be found. Instead, fear. Thomas slowed his mopping so he could observe more closely. Because he was kneeling low, his angle allowed him to see things people walking upright might overlook. Faint bruises on the girl's legs. On her ankles. The flinch she made every time the woman spoke. The way her eyes scanned around, not in curiosity, but in desperation, as if searching for someone who could help her. And then he saw it. That tiny hand, trembling, lifted behind the woman's back and began to tap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pause. Then again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thomas's heart constricted. The sounds around him faded, leaving only that invisible rhythm echoing in his mind. 5 taps. Repeated. The silent signal for help. "No way," Thomas whispered. But he knew exactly what he was seeing. He had taught Emma that signal. He had watched that video dozens of times. The girl was asking for help. As if sensing his gaze, the girl turned around. Her large brown eyes, glossy with tears, met his. In that split second, an invisible thread connected them. Those eyes said clearly, "Please save me. I'm not safe. She is not my mother. Please see me." The woman noticed the girl looking back and jerked her arm hard. "Lily," she barked, "I told you to keep your eyes down." The girl, Lily, flinched and lowered her head quickly. But before she did, Thomas caught a single tear slipping down her cheek. The group continued walking. The boys still laughed. The woman pulled Lily along faster. Lily glanced back once more, her pleading gaze cutting straight into Thomas's heart. Thomas stood frozen, still holding the mop. His mind spun. He wondered, did I see it wrong? Am I imagining things? Maybe she's just a strict mother. Maybe the girl is scared because she was scolded. But then he remembered the video, remembered the missing children, remembered the horrifying number each year, remembered that most abductions happened in crowded places where no one paid attention. He remembered Emma, and he asked himself, what if that were Emma? If Emma were calling for help, and no one helped? How would he live with himself? In that moment, Thomas knew exactly what he had to do. He set the mop down, left the cart behind, and began following them. Thomas kept his distance, trying not to draw attention. The woman and the 3 children walked toward the clothing stores at the end of the mall. They stopped in front of a shoe store. The woman seemed to be checking something on her phone. Thomas pretended to wipe a nearby chair, eyes never leaving the group. He tried to think fast. What should he do? Walk up and confront her? But with what question? "Excuse me, are you kidnapping that child?" The woman would deny it for sure. Lily might be too terrified to say the truth. And Thomas would likely be seen as delusional, maybe even lose his job or be detained for causing trouble. No, he needed proof, and he needed someone with authority to intervene. Thomas pulled out his old phone, pretending to check messages while trying to secretly take photos of them. But his hands were shaking so badly, the pictures came out blurry. The woman suddenly glanced back. Thomas immediately dropped his gaze to the phone, pretending to read. His heart pounded so loudly he could hear it in his ears. A moment later, she turned away and continued walking. They were getting closer to the exit. Thomas realized he had to act now. Once they left the mall, it would be nearly impossible to find them again. He scanned for help. Near the information desk, a young security guard stood leaning against the counter, holding a cup of coffee, scrolling his phone. Thomas took a deep breath and approached, trying to look calm, even though every nerve in his body was stretched thin. "Excuse me," Thomas said, his voice slightly trembling. "Can you help me with something?" The guard looked up. eyeing Thomas from head to toe. The faded janitor uniform said everything, and raised an eyebrow, cautious. "What's going on?" he asked lazily. Thomas pointed toward the woman and the 3 children, now about 30 feet away, nearing the exit. "The woman in the blue coat," Thomas said quickly. "I think the girl isn't her daughter." The guard, his name tag read Blake, frowned slightly. "How do you know?" Blake asked, still skeptical. "She just used a distress signal. I know it sounds crazy, but—" "What signal?" Blake interrupted, now paying more attention. Thomas quickly explained the signal for help, the 5 taps, and how victims could silently alert someone in public spaces. Blake listened, but his expression stayed half doubtful, half concerned. "You sure? The kid could have just tapped randomly." "I know what I saw," Thomas replied. His voice taut. "Please, just check. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. But if I'm right, and we do nothing—" He let the sentence hang. Blake looked toward the woman, then back at Thomas, clearly conflicted. Just then, Mr. Peterson, the mall manager, stepped out of a nearby store. When he saw Thomas, his face flushed red. "Miller," he barked, "what are you doing here? Is the food court floor done yet?" Thomas turned around, frustration surging. "Mr. Peterson, No buts! I've warned you about wasting time. You're fired. Pack your things and get out." "Please, listen to me," Thomas pleaded, desperation in his voice. "A child is in danger." "I don't care," Peterson roared. "Get out! Right now!" Blake looked between Thomas and Peterson, clearly torn about who to obey. And while they argued, the woman and the 3 children were almost at the door. Thomas saw them about to disappear. Something inside him snapped. He thought of Emma. If it were his daughter, desperate for help, would he want someone, anyone, to step in? "I'm sorry," Thomas said to Peterson, voice trembling but resolute, "but I can't just stand by." Before anyone could react, Thomas bolted. He sprinted across the hall, his shoes squeaking against the polished floor, heart pounding violently. Behind him, Peterson screamed, "Stop him! Call security!" But Thomas didn't stop. He ran faster than he ever had in his life. The noise caused the woman to turn around. Her eyes widened when she saw Thomas running toward her. In an instant, her calm facade shattered, revealing panic. That was all the confirmation Thomas needed. "Stop!" Thomas shouted. "Someone call the police! This woman is kidnapping a child!" The mall fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. The woman froze. The 2 boys stared in confusion. And Lily looked at Thomas, her eyes filled with desperate hope. Blake had followed Thomas. The moment he saw the terror on the woman's face, his entire demeanor changed. He lifted his radio. "Code 10-13, he said into it. "Possible child abduction at main exit. Need immediate backup." Realizing she was cornered, the woman glanced at the door, now about 10 feet away, then scanned the crowd. People had pulled out their phones and were recording. "There's a misunderstanding," she tried to say calmly. "They're my kids, all 3 of them." "Then you won't mind showing me your paperwork," Blake said, still holding the radio. "And we need to speak with the children separately." "I don't have to," she snapped, but Thomas cut in. "Ask the girl," he said clearly, heart hammering. "Ask Lily if she's her mother." The crowd went silent. All eyes fixed on Lily. The girl stood trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. The woman bent down, her voice sweet, but clearly threatening. "Lily, tell them. Who's your mother?" Lily opened her mouth but couldn't speak. She looked at the woman, then at Thomas, then back again. Fear and hope battled across her tiny face. Thomas knelt, lowering himself to eye level. His voice was soft but steady. "Lily, You're safe now. No one will hurt you. You can tell the truth. It was those two words, "You're safe," that broke her. Lily burst into sobs, her small shoulders shaking with each cry. "I don't know who she is," she wailed. "She grabbed me at the park. She said if I called for help, she'd hurt my mom. I want to go home. I want my mom." The crowd erupted. Gasps, cries of horror. People shouting into their phones, calling 911. Voices rose. "Hold her! Don't let her run!" Oh my God, that poor child. The woman realized it was over and made a desperate attempt to run. But Blake and another guard quickly blocked her. They restrained her as she kicked and screamed. "Let me go," she shrieked. "You don't understand. They'll kill me. They'll—" Police sirens wailed outside, drowning out her words. Thomas remained kneeling, reaching a hand toward Lily. The girl hesitated for only a moment before collapsing into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I saw you," she cried. "I knew you saw my signal. I knew you would help." Thomas held her tightly, his eyes stinging. "I saw you," he whispered. "I saw you, Lily, and I'll never forget you." Around them, the mall turned into controlled chaos. Police rushed in and handcuffed the woman as she screamed. Paramedics examined Lily and the two boys, who, it turned out, were also victims kidnapped from other states. And at the very center of it all stood Thomas Miller, once invisible, once just a janitor no one bothered to notice, holding a child who had been saved because of his courage. Peterson stood at the edge of the crowd, his face pale, slowly realizing what had almost happened. He had nearly fired the man who saved a child, nearly allowed a kidnapped girl to slip away forever. But Thomas didn't look at Peterson. He didn't look at the crowd either. He just held Lily, smoothing her tangled hair, whispering again and again, "You're safe now. You're going home. You'll see your mother soon." And for the first time in 3 years, Thomas Miller felt like he was no longer invisible. Police cars became 4, then 6. The main entrance of Riverside Mall was sealed off with yellow tape. Shoppers were held to give statements. News cameras began to appear outside. The story spread too fast on social media, and reporters caught the scent of something big. Thomas sat on a bench inside, Lily still clinging to his hand. The medics had checked her. No serious injuries, but signs of stress and malnutrition were obvious. The two boys with her were taken to another area, also being examined and gently questioned. A female detective approached, early 40s, short brown hair, eyes sharp yet warm. The badge on her jacket read, "Detective Sarah Hayes." "Mr. Miller?" she said, professional but not cold. Thomas nodded, starting to stand, but Lily squeezed his hand. "It's okay. You can stay seated," Hayes said, pulling a chair close. She leaned down and smiled at Lily. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Sarah. You can call me Detective Sarah. You were very brave today. You know that?" Lily didn't answer, only stared with wide, frightened eyes. Hayes turned to Thomas. "Can you tell me in as much detail as possible what you saw?" Thomas recounted everything from the start. When he noticed Lily, the 5 taps, the plea in her eyes, his decision to follow. As he spoke, Hayes took careful notes, nodding from time to time. "Where did you learn about this signal?" Hayes asked. Thomas took out his phone and opened the video he'd watched 3 months earlier. "Here, I taught my daughter to use it. Her name's Emma. She's 6. I just wanted her to have a way to ask for help if I couldn't get there in time." There was something in his tone, a mix of love and fear, that made Hayes pause. She looked up, as if truly seeing the person in front of her for the first time. "You're a single father?" she asked quietly. Thomas nodded. 3 years now. My wife left. It's just me and Emma." Hayes was thoughtful for a beat, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did something extraordinary today, Mr. Miller. Many people would have walked past. But you listened. You saw. And because of that, this little girl is still here." Thomas's throat tightened. I couldn't stand still. If that were Emma." "I understand," Hayes replied. "And the world needs more people like you." She stood, glancing toward the private room where the woman was being questioned. "We'll need your full statement later. For now, do you need anything? Water? Coffee?" The girl, Thomas looked down at Lily. "When can she see her family?" "We're confirming right now," Hayes said. "As soon as we find a missing person report that matches, we've already sent photos to compare. If it's what we think, her parents will be here in a few hours." An hour later, Hayes returned, her expression grave. She sat opposite Thomas and lowered her voice. "The woman you stopped, her real name is Dana Voss. She's wanted in 3 states for child trafficking. We've been tracking her for 6 months, but always a step behind." Thomas's stomach clenched. Child trafficking? "Lily disappeared 3 weeks ago from a park in Portland," Hayes continued. "Her mother turned away for 1 minute. When she looked back, Lily was gone. No witnesses, no leads. The family's been in despair." Thomas looked at Lily, still gripping his arm. 3 weeks. 3 weeks living in fear, next to a stranger, not knowing if she'd ever get home. "What about the 2 boys?" Thomas asked. "Both victims," Hayes said, her voice turning steely. "One from Sacramento, missing 4 months. The other from Seattle, 2 months. Dana used them as cover, posing as a traveling family so no one would notice." "My God," Thomas whispered. Hayes leaned in, lowering her voice further. "One more thing. In Dana's bag we found a burner phone with encrypted messages, fake passports, and—" she hesitated to choose her words, "photos of other children. We believe Dana is part of a much larger network." Thomas felt the blood in his veins go cold. "How many?" "Not certain, but based on what we seized, at least 5 more, maybe more." "Where are they?" "That's what we need to determine," Hayes said. "Dana is talking. She's more afraid of her associates than of us, so she's willing to bargain." Thomas met Hayes's eyes. "How can I help?" Hayes considered. "You've done more than you realize, Mr. Miller. But, if you're truly willing, there's one more way you could be involved." 2 hours later, Thomas sat in a police van, wearing a reflective vest stamped Civilian Volunteer. Hayes explained, Dana had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence, and was pointing them to where other victims were being kept, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial zone about 20 miles from the city. "Why bring him?" an officer asked, nodding toward Thomas. "Because the kids will panic," Hayes said. "They've been held captive, possibly abused. Uniforms will terrify them. Mr. Miller," she turned to Thomas, "looks like a regular person, a dad. If they see him, the children might feel safer." Thomas understood. For the first time in his life, being ordinary, not powerful, not intimidating, was an advantage. The convoy cut its lights as it entered the area. The industrial zone was a maze of old concrete shells, most of them abandoned. The GPS led them to a large building with shattered windows and graffiti-scabbed walls. "This is it," Hayes said quietly over the radio. "All units, stand by." Thomas stared at the cold hulk of a building, heart thudding. Somewhere inside, children were waiting for someone to find them. Just as Lily had waited. The officers fanned out, silent and practiced. On Hayes's signal, they surged in. The metal door was breached. Shouts thundered. "Police! Hands up!" Thomas waited just outside with Hayes, as instructed. From inside came the thudding of feet, cries, the sound of children sobbing. "Confirmed!" A voice crackled over the radio. "We've located 4 children. Medical needed." Hayes turned to Thomas. "Ready?" Thomas nodded, though no one could ever be truly ready for what they were about to see. They went in. It was dark and cold inside, the damp stench mingling with something worse, the smell of despair. Flashlights swept down endless corridors. Finally, they reached a large room at the back. The sight before Thomas was something he knew he'd never forget. 4 children, roughly 5 to 9 years old, huddled in a corner. A single filthy, torn mattress. No blankets, no pillows. A bucket of water in the corner. Clothes dirty, hair matted, eyes hollow with fear. Seeing uniforms, they shrank tighter together and burst into tears. "Don't take us away. Please don't hurt us. We'll be good." Hayes crouched, keeping her distance. "You're safe now. We're the police, and we're here to take you home." But the children didn't believe it. They had been lied to too many times. The way they looked at the officers held only primal fear. Thomas stepped forward, kneeling low, holding out both empty hands so they could see he carried nothing threatening. "Hi there," he said, voice soft as a breeze. "My name is Thomas. I'm not a police officer. I'm just a dad. My little girl's name is Emma. She's 6, too." A small girl with black curly hair looked up. You're a dad?" "That's right," Thomas answered, his voice breaking. "And I know there are moms and dads out there who are missing you so much it hurts to breathe. They've been looking for you every day, not giving up. Now we're going to take you back to them." "Really?" a little boy asked, fragile but full of hope. "Really?" Thomas said, eyes wet. "I promise. You're going home." Bit by bit, the children left the corner and edged toward Thomas. The smallest girl, the one with the black curls, looked straight into his eyes, searching for something: sincerity, kindness, hope. Maybe she found it. She stepped forward and hugged him, small arms gripping tight. "Are you really a dad?" "I'm really a dad," Thomas said, holding her, speaking slowly. "And your parents are waiting." Soon all 4 were clustered around Thomas, clinging and crying. No longer from fear, but from relief. They were tiny, thin, crumpled by the days of terror. But they were alive, and they were about to go home. Behind them, Hayes quietly wiped away tears. 18 years on the job had shown her the darkest parts of humanity. But it had also let her witness moments like this, when a kind heart flipped the entire story. "All right, kids," Thomas whispered. "Let's go outside. There are ambulances waiting. They'll give you food and water and check your health. And then you'll see your parents." As they brought the children into the glow of the ambulance lights, Thomas froze. They'd just reported one child still missing, down in the basement. He and 2 officers rushed down the stairs. The basement was darker and colder. At the end of the corridor stood another door, locked from the outside with a heavy padlock. They broke it. Inside, on a thin mattress, lay a boy of about 8, curled up. His ankle was chained to the wall. Rage surged hot through Thomas, so intense he had to clench his fists to keep control. How could anyone do this to a child? "Need bolt cutters! Now!" an officer shouted. The chain was severed. The boy collapsed, weak and trembling. Thomas scooped him up, light as air. "What's your name?" Thomas asked gently. "Carlos," the boy whispered, hoarse. "Carlos, you're okay now. I'm getting you out of here." Thomas carried him up the stairs, into the light. Medics swarmed in, but Carlos wouldn't let go of Thomas. He clung to him as if letting go would let the darkness swallow him again. "It's okay," Thomas murmured, stroking the sweat-matted hair. "You're safe now, Carlos. Safe." When all 5 children had been examined and transported safely, Hayes came over. Thomas stood alone, watching the ambulances pull away, his hands still shaking. "You did very well, Mr. Miller," she said. Thomas shook his head. "They're just kids. How can anyone—" He couldn't finish. Hayes set a hand on his shoulder. "I ask myself that every day," she said softly. "But today, because of you, 6 children are going home. 6 families will be together again. That alone is enormous." Thomas nodded, wiping his eyes. "My daughter, Emma. I need to call her. She'll be worried." "Of course," Hayes smiled. "And, Mr. Miller, when you call, tell your daughter that her father is a hero." A week later, Thomas received a phone call he would never forget. It was Monday morning. Thomas was no longer working at the mall. After the incident, Mr. Peterson had tried to fire him, but the mall's owner, who had been following the news, intervened. They not only reinstated his job, but also issued a public apology and offered him a raise. But Thomas declined, not out of anger, but because he realized he could do more. He could help more. The phone rang. It was Detective Hayes. "Mr. Miller, I have good news," her voice warmer than before. "Lily's family wants to meet you. They want to thank you in person." Thomas's heart pounded. They want to meet me?" "They begged, actually," Hayes said. "Jennifer and Michael, Lily's parents. They said they owe you everything. They want their daughter to meet the man who saved her life." That afternoon, Thomas brought Emma to an address in a quiet suburb. A small house with a carefully tended lawn and a big maple tree casting shade. On the porch was a swing and a pile of toys. Before Thomas could knock, the door opened, and there, standing between a man and a woman, was Lily. She looked entirely different. Her hair was clean and neatly brushed, a yellow dress dotted with tiny flowers. But the biggest change was in her eyes, no longer hollow and frightened, but bright. "Mr. Thomas!" Lily cried, and ran toward him. Thomas knelt, arms open. She flung herself at him and hugged tightly. "Hi, Lily," Thomas said, his voice thick. "You look wonderful." "I'm home," Lily said simply. "Home with Mommy and Daddy." The woman, Jennifer, stepped forward. Her eyes were red. But she was smiling. She reached out for a handshake, then changed her mind and pulled Thomas into a hug. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "Thank you for seeing her. Thank you for not walking past. Thank you for bringing my child back." Thomas didn't know what to say. He only held the stranger who was crying on his shoulder, feeling the weight of gratitude and relief. Michael, the father, stepped up to shake Thomas's hand. The handshake was firm, but still trembling. 3 weeks, he said, voice hoarse. 3 weeks of not knowing if our daughter was alive. 3 weeks without sleep, without eating, just searching and praying. Then we got the call. She'd been found, because one man paid attention when no one else did. He paused, wiping his eyes. "Do you have kids, Thomas?" "I do," Thomas said, nodding toward Emma, who was standing shyly beside him. "My daughter, Emma." Michael knelt to Emma's level. "You're very lucky. You have a father who's a hero." Emma looked up at her dad, and Thomas saw pride shimmering in her eyes. They invited father and daughter inside. The house was warm, filled with photos of Lily, her first steps, birthdays, holidays. On the wall hung a big banner, "Welcome home, Lily." They sat in the living room. Jennifer brought cookies and chocolate milk for the girls. Lily and Emma, after a moment of shyness, were soon chattering over Lily's toys. "The doctor says she'll need therapy for a while," Jennifer said, watching her daughter with love and sadness. "She has nightmares. She's afraid of crowds. She doesn't want to look away from us. But she's alive, Michael added. Thanks to you, she's alive. And we'll be here to help her heal, for as long as it takes. Thomas watched Lily laughing with Emma. Yes, the fear was still there, beneath the surface. But now there was joy. There was hope. There's something we want to give you, Jennifer said, getting up. She went inside and returned with a wooden frame. It was a crayon drawing, the kind only a child could make. A man in a blue uniform holding the hand of a little girl. Above them, the sun shining. At the bottom, in messy child handwriting, "Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for saving me. You are my hero. Love, Lily." Thomas looked at the drawing, and this time he didn't hold back the tears. They fell freely as he lifted the frame. "This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me," he whispered. "It's the least we could do," Jennifer replied. They spent hours talking, sharing. Thomas told them about his life, about Michelle leaving, about the difficult years, about teaching Emma the silent safety signal. Jennifer and Michael told him about 3 weeks of hell, relentless searches, and the night they got the call that Lily had been found. "I collapsed," Jennifer admitted. 3 weeks of holding myself together, and then everything broke open. But they were tears of relief, tears of joy. When it was time to leave, Lily ran over again. "You'll come play again, right?" she asked, hopeful. "I promise," Thomas said, ruffling her hair. "And my daughter Emma seems to like you a lot. You two should play again." Lily nodded eagerly, then turned to Emma and said something that melted Thomas's heart. "You're really lucky. You have the best dad." Emma looked up at Thomas and smiled, a smile that said everything. That evening, on the drive home, Emma held Thomas's hand. "Dad," she asked, "are you proud of yourself?" Thomas thought about the question. For 3 years, he had seen himself as a failure, losing his wife, losing his home, losing a good job, feeling invisible to the world. But now, looking into his daughter's eyes, remembering Lily safe with her family, thinking of the 5 other children reunited. "Yes, Emma," he said. "For the first time in a very long time, I'm proud of myself." Thomas's story spread like a storm. The videos recorded at the mall, captured by passers-by, exploded across social media. In just 3 days, they reached more than 20 million views. Headlines appeared everywhere. Janitor turns into hero in seconds. The invisible man becomes the nation's hero. Single father disrupts child trafficking ring. TV networks lined up for interviews. News programs wanted him on air. But Thomas turned down most of them. He hadn't done it for fame. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. There was one invitation he accepted. A local news program wanted to do a segment on the signal for help, to educate parents and children. That Thomas was willing to talk about. Under the studio lights, with Emma sitting beside him, he told his story, from beginning to end. "I taught my daughter that signal 3 months ago," Thomas said. "I never thought I'd see someone else use it. But when I did, I couldn't look away. I just couldn't." The host asked, "What made you decide to run after them, even if it could cost you your job?" Thomas was silent for a few seconds, then answered slowly, "I thought of Emma. I thought, if my little girl were there, asking for help, and I wasn't around, I would want someone brave enough to step in. I would want someone to choose my daughter over their job, over convenience, over the fear of being misunderstood." He looked straight into the camera. "If you see a child in danger, please don't pretend you don't. Don't assume someone else will act. Don't be afraid of being wrong. Because if you're right and you don't act, a child could be lost forever. The interview ended with a moment where Emma demonstrated the signal for help on camera. Her voice was small, but clear and confident. "If I'm in danger and can't speak, I'll do this." She raised her hand, folded her thumb in, and closed the remaining fingers. "Or I'll tap 5 times. Like this." She tapped on the table. "And if someone knows this signal, they'll help me." That clip spread even further. More than 50 million views. Schools began teaching it. Parent organizations shared it. And most importantly, children learned it. 2 weeks later, Thomas received another call from a man named David Chen, the CEO of Secure Life Corporation, a company focused on child safety. "Mr. Miller, I've been following your story," Chen said over the phone. "You're not only brave, you're knowledgeable. You taught the signal to your daughter. You understand how important education is." "Thank you," Thomas said, still unsure where the call was headed. "I want to offer you a job," Chen said. "Director of Community Safety Programs. You'll go to schools, organizations, businesses, anywhere that needs it, to educate people on child safety, distress signals, signs of trafficking, how to intervene safely." Thomas held his breath. "Salary is $65,000 a year," Chen continued. "Full benefits, a flexible schedule so you can spend time with Emma." 65,000. Much more than anything he'd ever earned. More than he'd dared imagine. "Why me?" Thomas asked. "I'm not an expert." "No," Chen replied. "You have something more important. Credibility, a story, and a heart. When you speak, people listen. When you teach, they learn. Because they know you don't just talk, you've lived it." Thomas thought of Lily, of the children who had been rescued, of the ones who hadn't yet. "I accept," he said. 6 months later, Thomas's life had changed in ways he'd never imagined. He and Emma moved out of the cramped apartment into a small house with a backyard and 2 bedrooms. Emma had her own room, decorated with stars and zebras, her favorite things. Thomas had visited more than 50 schools, teaching thousands of children the signal for help. He always told Lily's story, with her family's permission, and each time he did, he saw the light of understanding appear in the children's eyes. They understood, they learned, and they remembered. Twice, 2 miraculous times, the signal saved a life. A little girl in Oregon used it during a video call with her teacher. A boy in Texas tapped 5 times at a grocery store, and a cashier who had watched Thomas's video recognized it. 2 children saved, 2 families reunited. Each time he heard the news, Thomas felt a deep sense of purpose. He realized this was what he had been born to do. Not to mop floors or balance ledgers, but to protect children who could not protect themselves. One Saturday in May, Thomas and Emma visited Lily and her family, something that had become a weekly tradition. Lily was doing much better. The nightmares had eased. Smiles came more easily. When she laughed, Thomas was reminded of the tiny, terrified girl in the mall, tapping out her desperate signal. "Do you know what we learned at school?" Lily asked as she and Emma sat on the porch swing. "What is it?" "The teacher said you came to our school. You taught the whole class the signal." Lily was solemn. "The teacher said, 'You're a hero.'" Thomas smiled. "Your teacher is kind." "No," Lily shook her head. "You're really a hero. You saved me. And now you teach other kids how to save themselves. That's what heroes do." Thomas looked at the little girl, who had endured so much, yet still found a way to trust, to laugh. And he knew she was right. Not because he was special, not because he had superpowers, but because he had chosen not to walk away, to choose to see, to choose to listen, to choose to intervene. And that choice made all the difference. That evening, after tucking Emma into bed, Thomas sat at the kitchen table reading emails. There were invitations to more schools, thank you messages from parents, an email from a nonprofit offering him a spokesperson role. But the email that made him stop was from a teacher in Idaho. "Mr. Miller, one of my students used the signal you taught. The girl, Sarah, made it during a Zoom call. She was being abused by a family member and was too afraid to speak. But she remembered the signal. I recognized it and called the police. Now Sarah is safe, living with a kind foster family. Because of you, another child was saved." Thomas read it 3 times. His eyes stung. Another child. He looked up at the drawing Lily had given him, the man in the blue uniform holding the little girl's hand beneath a bright sun. It hung right in front of him, reminding him every day that one courageous act could change a life. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Daddy, aren't you going to bed?" Thomas opened his arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Emma climbed onto his lap and rested her head against his chest. "What are you doing?" "Reading a few messages from people we've helped." "You help a lot of people," Emma said. "I'm proud of you." Thomas kissed the top of her head. "I'm proud of you too. You know, everything started with you. I taught you the signal because I wanted to keep you safe. Because I love you so much I can't bear the thought of any child being abandoned, with no one to protect them." "And now you protect all the kids," Emma whispered. "I'm trying my best," Thomas said. "I really am." They sat quietly like that, in the warm golden light of the kitchen. Outside, the world kept turning. But here, in this moment, everything was peaceful. Thomas Miller was no longer invisible. More importantly, he had made the world see the children who had once been overlooked. Because when a child calls for help, whether with a shout or in silence, there will always be someone to listen. There will always be someone to stop. There will always be someone brave enough to act. And that is the legacy Thomas Miller left behind. This story is inspired by real events and by countless courageous individuals who have stepped in to protect children. Each year, more than 300,000 children in the United States are at risk of being trafficked and exploited. Learn the signal for help. Teach your children. Share the knowledge. If you notice unusual signs, a child avoiding eye contact, an adult answering in place of the child, a child who looks frightened or abused, the signal for help: raise the hand, fold the thumb in, close the fingers. Call 911 or the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-373-788. You can be a Thomas for someone's child. Be the one who sees. Be the one who listens. Be the one who intervenes. Dedicated to all the invisible heroes, janitors, security staff, teachers, parents, who see what others overlook. Thank you for listening when no one else did.